Hi everyone, and thank you so much for joining. This webinar is all about fixing problems in property through digital solutions. So joining me in this webinar are both Barry Soraf, partner at Referenges, and Grace Thompson, who is the partnership manager at the property management software Released. So in a couple of minutes, we will start with introductions of ourselves, but just to let everybody know that the Q&A box is open. So if anybody does have any questions, please feel free to pop it in that box and we will answer them at the end. Next slide, please. Perfect. So for those who are new here, showing on your screen at the moment are our core values here at Referenges. So we've got make a positive impact, get it done, deliver to a high standard, always make time, and dare to be bold. So just as a bit of background, I believe Barry and a couple of the other partners here at Referenges spent a lot of time working on these values and ensuring that they were perfect and relatable. So I'm sure Barry would have a lot to say on these, but I know that these values are definitely what us here at Referenges intend to live up to and the services that we want to deliver. I don't know if you have anything else to add to that slide, Barry, because I know how passionate you are about the core values.
I think it would be a bad idea to start me off on that, especially as I'm going to have to mute myself in a second because my dog's decided she wants to join this seminar and she's barking like a lunatic in the background.
And like you always say, that is how you know this is live.
Yeah.
So we're on to meet the host. So for the introductions, before I do pass over to both Barry and Grace to introduce themselves, for those who have not yet had the pleasure of meeting, I'm Emma and I'm the Digital Solutions Manager here at Referenges. So I will go into more detail around what this department entails and what we are trying to achieve for our clients in a short moment. But first of all, I will hand over to Barry to say hi and then over to Grace.
Afternoon, everyone who's here. As Emma said, my name's Barry Soraf. I'm a partner at Referenges. I tend to deal with most of the complex property-related stuff that the firm gets its hands on, which is we do seem to have an awful lot of property-related work, so that seems to keep me pretty busy. I do have a good support team. I know at least one of them is watching. You did, yeah? And yeah, and that's what I've been doing this job. This is my 31st year in the profession. I know I don't look old enough. That picture certainly doesn't look old enough, but that's quite an old picture. And but I do have a few grey hairs popping through now, which you can't see on that picture. As it says, I'm a frustrated airline pilot. That's what I really wanted to do. But after 30 years of doing this, I kind of got the hang of it.
And now over to Grace.
Hi everyone, hi Emma, hi Barry. Thanks so much for having me and having Released join you today. So I'm Grace Thompson. I look after all of our partnerships here at Released, which means that I work predominantly with our accounting and consulting partners. Released is a specialist commercial and mixed property management software. I believe we'll come on and talk about it a little bit more later. What I really do is work with people like the likes of Emma and Barry to really help them to become technology experts in the property space for their valued clients. I have been with Release just over 3 years, and it's been really exciting to see how the world of property has sort of adapted and changed in those 3 years, and seen the sort of stark growth that we've had within the team and just within tech adoption within the industry as a whole.
Perfect. Well, thank you both for joining. Next slide, please. Perfect. So now on to the exciting stuff. What is a digital solution? So as you can see, a digital solution is a term used to describe a solution that incorporates the use of a digital technology to solve a problem. So here at Referenges, we have offered our cloud bookkeeping services for a long time, but we soon realized that there is more to offer than just that. So what we wanted to do was to be able to offer our clients a safe space where they can come to us and tell us about their struggles with the current system they have in place for their business and what they would like to improve. As well as being able to recommend what we think would work best. So we want to ensure that they are first of all using their current financial system to its best ability, but also ensure that they're streamlining and automating their business from start to finish, both accounting and operations wise. So if you do currently have pain points in regards to your current operation structure or the finance system, feel like you are wearing too many hats within the business, unable to determine the cash flow position or just the current position of the business, or simply just want to spend less time on the manual input, then allowing us to help you and your business with our digital solutions means more time to focus on the real core elements and have access to all data on the go at all times. So this is one of the main reasons why we have partnered with such a great property management software such as Released, as we feel the service they offer and the product itself can really help improve and automate the management of a property portfolio from start to finish. So I won't go into too much detail. We'll allow Grace to go into more detail shortly around who Released are, what they can do and how they can help. But one of the things that really stood out for us is the fact that Released sync with the accounting software Xero, which is the accounting software that we do specialize in here at Raffingers. So having one side to manage the financials and then a separate software for property management, whilst both integrating with one another, to me just makes complete sense. So before I do hand over to Grace, if anyone watching now is interested in a review of their current system, please do not hesitate to get in touch with me. My contact details were available at the beginning of this webinar, but I will make sure they are sent out again for those who did not quite catch them. And for a short time only, I am offering a free system review for those within the property sector. So yeah, I would definitely recommend grabbing one of those whilst you can, as I think it can really benefit. And as well as that, I can also assist with app implementation, cloud health checks, and much more. So all services can be found via the digital solutions page on our website, along with more information on our approach, which you're currently able to see on this page. So I will hand over to Grace to give a little bit more information on Released and what they do.
Thanks so much, Emma. Yeah, as I said earlier, so happy to be here. Thanks for having us. So yeah, a little bit of a who, what, why, I suppose. So Released is a specialist cloud-based property management solution. And we're specialists in the fact that we are designed for commercial and mixed portfolios. So property portfolios that are looking after commercial properties, such as retail assets, industrial, all portfolios that have a mix of both. We are quite unique in our position where we offer a solution for both landlords and managing agents. So whichever side of the property management spectrum you're on, you could use Released. As Emma touched upon, our platform does have a live two-way integration with the accounting platform Xero. This is a real strength of our platform because it enables all portfolio and financial information to be centralized for full control from one screen and one central point. So whether that means that you have an in-house accounts team or you're outsourcing to somebody like Raffingers, everybody's going to be working off the same data at the same time. There's so many benefits and so many features to the Released platform, but it is really, really important to note that the main thing really is that Released automates a lot of the really manual and time-consuming tasks related with property management. And what this means is that owners or managers can really step away from those really arduous day-to-day activities and actually refocus their time on what it is that they want to deliver for their business and how they want to grow. Emma touched upon before how Raffingers can help you guys to kind of move from your current systems to a new system. We also offer support when it comes to implementation. We know that it can be a big challenge to move systems, so we have a whole dedicated team in-house that do that. And we work closely with Raffingers because we are passionate about working with accountants and consultants who are taking the lead and helping their clients to really modernize their businesses and helping them to future-proof them. So it's important for us as a tech business to work with the more forward-thinking firms out there like Raffingers, and just work really cohesively to make sure that the clients are getting a really good experience, not only modernizing their accounting platform, but also their operations, and doing so in an environment where they're surrounded by trusted experts, both on the accounting side and the technology side.
Perfect, thank you, Grace. And as mentioned, again, Grace's details can be found at the beginning of this webinar. But again, if you didn't take them down, I will make sure they go out at the end. So please feel free to contact either myself and Grace if you do have any questions in regards to the software Released. Next slide, please. Okay, so before we do move on to property businesses and their challenges, I just wanted to briefly talk more about how property companies are adopting tech more and more each day. So Barry and Grace, please do feel free to jump in and give your overview on this. But as it has been mentioned on this slide, back in the day, we would simply flick through the newspaper and look for available houses on the market. But now we simply log into the web and search for the available properties that way. So as well as that, a lot of businesses are now adopting the flexible working from home approach, which means there is no choice but to adopt technology and it basically just ensure that all employees are happy with the current system setup and that it is easy and seamless to use. So Barry, following on from what I have mentioned, and from your point of view, I know you work with a lot of property clients who are still using manual books, and the main reason is because it works for them and they are unaware of the solutions available. So do you think that there is still uncertainty within property businesses and wanting to adopt tech, and why do you think that is?
Yes, is the short answer, but the slightly longer version is what you find, particularly with property businesses, they have a lot of record keeping requirements, who are the tenants, what's their rentals, how long's their lease, what checks, what compliance have they done, all the various checks they have to do, and especially where they don't use managing agents, but even where they use managing agents, they have to keep these records. And traditionally they use spreadsheets to do it because that's how it was done a long time ago. And once you've set up like that, it feels for many of them like quite an undertaking to suddenly change that, because it kind of in their mind works, or it's not a problem. And one of the things I've learned is most of these people have a lot of problems because just their financial and tax compliance alone is complex and huge. So they're firefighting those type of problems, and they've got problems with tenants and the day-to-day. So they spend their time focusing on those type of problems and ignoring the things that are kind of working without too much hassle. What it tends to mean is they're still working inefficiently. They're not doing things as well as they could. They're spending time without realizing it on things they don't need to spend time on. And as a result, probably they're slow adopters of technology, is probably slower than most other businesses. That's kind of how I feel about it.
But do you think that they are slower in adopting the technology? Because obviously there's a lot of softwares out there, Release being one of the great ones, who can assist with the property management side of things. But do you think it's because they just don't know that they exist or haven't been introduced to the software as of yet, which is maybe why they're so scared of adopting that tech without knowing exactly what it does?
There'll be a bit of that, but I think mostly it will be a cost benefit. It will be a flawed cost benefit analysis in their head. In their mind, they're thinking it's kind of working. Why do I need to spend any money improving something that's working when actually it could work a lot better for a small amount of money? But they don't think of it in those terms.
Yeah, well, this is exactly why we're doing this webinar, to obviously make our clients and all businesses aware that obviously there are great software such as Released and especially Xero, which can help them. So yeah, that's definitely a bonus. But Grace, I know that obviously there are many things that are changing within the property world, especially like I said, around the tech side. So is there anything else that you think has changed within the tech and property side of things?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously, I don't need to sort of wax lyrical on what we've all lived through for the last 2 years. Everyone knows exactly what's happened. And what we see within Release, we hold a fair amount of commercial property data. And what we see is that there were trends pre-pandemic around shortening lease lengths, the decline of retail, the rise of industrial. This has all been happening kind of very slowly over the last few years, and we're beginning to see trends and patterns emerging. But then what happened, obviously, as we went into those global lockdowns, was these just absolutely accelerated. And we saw, these trends just accelerated rapidly. And now we're living in a slightly different landscape, especially when you're looking at the commercial property side. So, for example, retail, destination retail is sort of still okay and still kind of on the way up. But then when you have the normal high street is kind of struggling more than ever before. The use of office space has changed entirely, and then you've got industrial assets booming. So overall, there's all this change, both positive and negative, depending on what asset class you're looking at. So what this presents for the industry is challenges and opportunities, and that's what I think we need to focus on. It's not just straight up challenges. There's also really, really good opportunities for people to perhaps divest in one particular asset and try and reinvest their money into something else to really focus on achieving their portfolio growth goals over the next few years. The challenge is that if they are using, Barry mentioned they're using spreadsheets. It's very, very common what we see at Release. A lot of these clients are moving on to Release as their kind of first foray into any kind of cloud technology. And before that, they'll be using spreadsheets, maybe like a Dropbox or a Google Drive or something to store files. And And in that state where they've got those really siloed and disparate systems, it's very, very difficult to actually get the full real picture of exactly how their portfolio is performing. And without that sort of information to hand, it's then more difficult either for themselves internally, or if they work externally, you know, with advisors like Raffingers, you know, it's very difficult for them to see exactly what their position is so that they can make strategic moves to ensure that they achieve the growth that they want to achieve. So yes, as Barry said, you know, there are fires they're putting out all of the time, but fundamentally, if they don't have sort of core systems that give a single source of truth, that's where it's really, really difficult to then start acting more strategically. So we're in a new phase in property, real estate, however you want to phrase it. We are in a bit of a new era here, and there are challenges that need to be proactively sort of approached, and they can't be left until they're a crisis. They need to actually start planning around how we're going to, you know, mitigate any lost revenue, you know, how we're going to deal with like struggling tenant relationships. But there are also huge opportunities for these businesses to actually grow and thrive. But it's difficult to, you know, mitigate risk or grasp opportunity without knowing exactly where you're stood right now.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say that, because obviously, like you said, everybody knows what's happened over the past 2 years or so, and working from home was enforced. So you had no choice but to work from home and to adopt tech. So obviously, whilst working from home and having to adopt tech, I'm sure a lot of businesses, especially property, have had to move to the cloud in order for, firstly, their employees to work from home, for their books and records to be stored on the cloud so they can access it at all times. So like you said, the world is changing, and it has changed a lot in the last 2 years purely because of the enforcements that have come into place with the working from home, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think it's not just about the changes that have been forced. You know, we're now in a bit of a cultural change as well, where people aren't wanting to necessarily go into the office anymore 5 days a week. It doesn't necessarily seem like it's a requirement. So yeah, being able to give people that workplace flexibility is great. And really going beyond that, I mean, with App Release, we have a full mobile app suite. So what we enable is for our property managers and landlords that use Release to actually manage their portfolio on the go from their phone. So that's really taking it to that next level. But I don't know about you guys, you know, I pick up work emails on my phone. We use Slack internally. I'm always on my phone on Slack when I'm out and about. So even if I am working from home or I'm working remotely, it's not even just when I'm on my laptop I'm accessible. I'm actually pretty much accessible at all times, which that's a conversation for a different day, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. But it does mean that, you know, if I've got colleagues to respond to in different regions, you know, I am accessible. And, you know, this is kind of a more, with people maybe picking their working hours a little bit more, having a centralized system where all that data is accessible, you can communicate easily via that system, I think is just going to become more and more important.
For sure. I mean, here at Raffingers, we've definitely adopted tech a lot more. I don't know how you feel, Barry, but I know for a fact that obviously when we have been working from home, you know, we use Microsoft Teams, we use SharePoint, everything we now use is on the cloud, because we obviously want to make it an efficient workplace where people can work from home if they need to or if they want to. But going back to the point you made about being accessible at all times, I mean, Barry, you're probably one of the best people to comment on that, because I know you are literally accessible from like 4 a.m. to 11 o'clock at night. But I don't know if you have anything else to add to Grace's point.
Can I say it's not it's not a good thing. It's why I don't have a life anymore. Yeah, I mean, most of what she said I kind of agree with, in fact nearly all of it. I would say the one thing I've noticed with particularly in the property sector is actually they didn't run towards technology the way most other clients did. Mostly they just got their people in the office. That, you know, most of the really large property clients I deal with just had their people coming in. They didn't actually work from home much. They resisted that move. I'm not sure why. I won't name names, but there's half a dozen I can think of straight away who were not working from home. You know, they had large staffs in the office, you know, managing portfolios, dealing with tenants, mainly because the sorts of things they're dealing with are, you know, face-to-face issues. You know, tenants need stuff repaired. You know, there's problems, people lose keys or whatever it is that they need to manage. They need boots on the ground. So they more or less didn't make the great leap that some of us made, like we did. I mean, you know, the idea that we'd all be, I'm sitting here working at home now, you know, I'd never done it before lockdown in my life, you know.
Yeah.
Sorry about the green rules. I've explained for those who
but with those companies and businesses that you are referring to, Barry, is it because they don't have the correct software or tech in place to allow them to be flexible and work from home?
I think it's a cultural thing.
Yeah.
You know, because there is a requirement for certainly some of their people to be there. There's almost like a, you know, again, it falls in the bracket of things that, you know, too busy to worry about very often. You know, just make sure everybody's here rather than try and discern which ones could work from home and put the systems in place. It's more, you know, haven't we got enough to be dealing with here? Just get everyone in the office.
Yeah, well, I know I mentioned it at the beginning of this webinar, but our goal is to obviously make all of our clients, especially those within the property industry, aware of the softwares that are available to them, which again is why we have partnered with a great software such as Really. So hopefully we can start to draw more attention and, you know, help our clients become aware of what is available to them.
I mean, I can think of half a dozen scenarios in the last 6 weeks where if they'd have had something like released in place, my life would have been a lot easier, and clients would have not spent as much time on something as I needed them to get something done.
Yeah, well, let's hope that they watch this and then see how great Released is, and yeah, and what we can do for them.
In fact, about 30 seconds before we joined this, I got an email from a client, and I'm sitting there thinking, if only you had Released in your office, I wouldn't be sitting here having to read a 3-page email if I print it out.
No, for sure. Next slide, please. Perfect. So now we are going to go on to property businesses and their challenges. So next slide, please. Amazing. So challenge 1 is the business position. So Barry, I'm going to start with you. So what has been your first-hand client experience when it comes to the business position? So like, what have you noticed a trend in the biggest risks?
Right, well, so there's the traditional biggest risk, and then there's the ones that we're kind of, for the last 2 years, have become much more prevalent. So the biggest risk, which has largely dropped off the radar for most, although it's just starting to come back, is cost of debt. So interest rate risk. For years, we've had a generation now of hyper low interest rates where, you know, people, particularly in the sector who are heavily exposed to large amounts of debt, you know, they've got used to paying very low rates of interest and growing very quickly off the back of that. You know, suddenly looking a little bit over their shoulder the way perhaps they were 10, 12 years ago when rates started to fall, but the market for finance pretty much dried up. And it doesn't cause a problem immediately, it causes a problem over time, because people have deals that expire, finance deals that expire that need renewing, they need to renew debt, and suddenly they're faced with the prospect of, you know, not being able to access the sorts of debt costs that they might have been able to. So that's a big traditional risk that's starting to come back for people that have kind of disappeared for a long time. The one that's kind of dropped heavily at the time when lockdowns first started is exactly number 2, their rent arrears. It became almost standard for commercial tenants to just stop paying completely, whether they could afford it or not. I won't name names. There's one very large organisation who would have had a boom time during lockdown because they are in the medical industry and the retail, and they were routinely writing to landlords saying they couldn't, you know, they needed to defer rents. So that was particularly prevalent in the commercial sector. Initially, a lot of private residential tenants were stopping paying rents as well, although my anecdotal evidence is most of those have caught up or are catching up, but the commercial one is going to be a long-term arrears situation, and a lot of those arrears will end up getting written off. That for the large corporate landlords, that's going to be a burden that will take some time to unravel. The absence of good financial information and one of the things that was actually very interesting was suddenly, and we had a lot of commercial landlords scrambling around trying to dig out copies of leases when this all happened. you know, going back to paper archives, trying to find the original leases they'd signed with tenants that suddenly weren't paying, and seeing how long was left and what clauses were in there, and all of that stuff that, you know, comes back to the need to have better records, that, you know, having to spend time digging those type of things out, which, you know, was a real burden for people. And, you know, they're the main challenges right now, I guess: arrears, finance, and cost of finance.
Just adding to that though, what I have seen is, I know we keep on going back to, you know, what's happened the past 2 years, but even just in general, when businesses do require funding, so for example, if they want to acquire a property, for example, they will require a nice bit of funding if they need it, but the information they need in order to gain that funding are accurate financial data, management accounts, for example. Their cash flow position is a very big one. But obviously, if you do not have your records available on a clean, tidy system, and it's literally all a paper trail, all paper-based spreadsheets, it's going to be really difficult. And this has happened in the past. It has been really difficult to obviously put that information together in a quick, timely fashion in order to obviously help gain that funding. It works, it happens, but it's not as clean and tidy as it would be if there was simply a good system in place available via the cloud, where us as accountants just log on and export all of the information required.
That is less of an issue sometimes in real estate, because most of the lending is asset related. So, you know, you buy an asset, you have the deposit, they'll lend it, they'll make the lend. It's not like there is an element of it, but they don't need to see wider financial information as often as you would traditionally with other types of lending.
Cool. Grace, I don't know if you want to add anything to this slide. I know obviously you probably see it every day. So obviously when businesses approach Released, or the accountant on behalf of the business approaches, there's probably a number of reasons why they are moving over from their manual books or whatever system they were using to Released. And it's probably one of the main reasons is most likely to avoid the risk of how they're doing it at the moment and the risk they could be facing. So what is it that you see when they approach you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd say normally there are kind of 3 or 4 key pillars that I would like encapsulate particular challenges under, and all these ones listed here more or less fall into the mitigating risk category. So, you know, wanting to understand what their arrears position is, you know, wanting to have access to data and understand what key dates are coming up so they can actually be more proactive. Another core pillar would be around like the efficiency piece. So people just wanting to be a bit more, to save time, automate, be more efficient. Another one would be mobility. And another one is kind of encompasses all of the above, but because they want to focus on growth. So really all of these come into the risk portion. And the one that we see really, really frequently is the arrears question. So lots of the businesses that come and speak to us are struggling to keep track with the arrears across the portfolio, especially if they are managing a slightly larger portfolio, lots and lots of Released clients. You know, they've got hundreds of units that they're managing. And these like tracking arrears and keeping on top of all these different tenancies, you know, it can get away from them quite quickly. And they're getting to a point where, as Barry said, a lot of them are just wiping these clear. But what we have within the Released system is, because of that integration with Xero, it's really, really easy to keep track of which rental demands have been paid and which haven't. So what we can give them is just that centralized report, just like from the get-go, that says, look, this is the arrears position across the portfolio. This is very, very accurate, because it's from the property management system and the accounting system speaking together. But then also, you know, to accelerate cash flow through the business, you know, functionality takes it that step further, to actually automate that arrears chasing process, which kind of then helps them to solve that challenge. So yeah, I'd say that all of these fall into the mitigating risk category, but yeah, they all resonate with us, and they're something that we see a lot of. But there are solutions out there in the market that can help them to solve these challenges for sure.
And just to add to that, oh no, go on, Barry, you can start.
Where you see this a lot is in service charge portfolios.
Oh yeah,
huge amounts of arrears, and really key to manage it, because there's time limits before which they're automatically wiped off, and you find agents really struggling to keep these records, and you know, some of the freeholders really getting narky with agents because they don't get the information sometimes right up to the last minute, and by which time it's almost too late to collect arrears.
Yeah, and it's huge for us. So we have a full service charge budgeting and tracking functionality that integrates with Xero again. So what we see a lot is that it's kind of like a breath of fresh air to be able to actually set up a budget, and then because of the integration, track that expenditure in real time and actually be able to see whether you are on budget for the year, and then actually make business decisions around, what agents or landlords will or won't spend money on, based on how the budget is actually tracking, in that quarter or in that year. And then actually when you get to the end of the year, you don't have these wildly imbalanced totals, and just being able to actually reconcile that at the end of the period and send out all your balancing invoices and stuff. It just is such a breath of fresh air for these businesses. But yeah, it's a huge challenge to stay on top of that. So again, around the automation piece, I think that's what drives a lot of people to start to review their systems, because there's a lot of missed money there. A lot of people missing the opportunity to really ensure that they're actually capturing everything that they're owed.
Definitely. What I have noticed is that there is a pattern, because as soon as you introduce one solution to remove a risk, you're then removing about 2 other risks that are happening. So for example, I know we've mentioned the rent in arrears, but if you had a system in place which gave you that information to let you know who is in arrears, what is owed, etc., it would then help with the cash flow position. So then you've already, by introducing one solution, you've already killed 2 risks at the same time. So yeah, I think that that really helps. But yeah, next slide please. Perfect. So challenge 2 is portfolio management and workplace mobility. So Barry, again, sorry, I'm going to start with you first. So what do you think, what has been your first-hand experience with this at the moment within the industry? I know obviously you work with a lot of clients on a daily basis who are within the property sector. So do you want to start by telling us your first-hand experience, and then we'll go from there?
Oh.
Sorry, I muted because the dog was barking and stopped. What do I want to tell you? And to be honest, most of my experience on the other side, most of my stuff is, what do I say, impact on tenant workplace mobility. I mean, I think if I was looking at this, I'd say the biggest challenge is the one that Grace alluded to before, and it is the change in culture away from the acceleration of the way people are dealing with commercial property. There are massive amounts, they're huge commercial landlord portfolios that are nervously sitting, looking over their shoulder, wondering where the next generation of tenants are, and wondering how they can very quickly follow the long-running trend of moving into residential, where the rental market is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger as more and more people are falling out of being able to afford to buy a property. I'm not sure that's really what you're asking me, but that kind of is how I'm answering it.
Well, what I was going to add is we briefly touched base on workplace mobility at the moment, and how, a lot of businesses, including property, I mean, from your point of view, Barry, I know you mentioned that a lot of the property businesses you work with haven't actually adopted working from home as such. But for those who have, obviously, it's made a huge difference to their lives and their employees' lives, and, the sort of working experience that they have now. But on top of that, they now have, a nice app stack, I would call it, for their business on what they would be using on a daily basis now, whilst having that workplace mobility.
Well, I would say that's true of everyone, really. I'm not sure it's necessarily true to pursue. We're all, listen, I'm sitting here in a nice jumper, some jeans, with a cup of tea in front of me, 3 screens, and in my home office, and I can finish early and go to the theatre tonight, which is what I'm planning to do as soon as we're done. So, that's something that wasn't an option 2 years ago. There's no way on earth I'd be finishing work early to go to the theatre. So there you go, lifestyle.
It's nice.
I'm going to Back to the Future tonight, in case anyone's interested. I'll let you know where it is.
Oh, I saw that recently, Barry. I recommend it. It's good. It was good fun.
Don't know if I should pull you back into the webinar.
Yeah. I mean, who cares?
Yeah, so Grace, so what is it that you've seen then, obviously being within this industry?
Yeah, sure. So there is obviously the workplace mobility thing in terms of working from home and how much easier that is. But actually, I mean, there's a thing there around tenant experience. And I think this is actually what might even be more important. So even if then people aren't working from home and they are in office, you know, as Barry alluded to, a lot of these people did have to go in office because there's a degree of face-to-face about these things. You know, as Barry said, people need keys, things need fixing, maintenance people need to go down, and they need to sometimes actually have face-to-face conversations with tenants. So, like for example, on the really side of things, you know, we have a tenant app that if you know a tenant has an issue, they can actually log that straight to their property manager or landlord via the app, attach videos, images, and any text with that, so that, you know, if it's a maintenance task, rather than having to describe what's happening, they just snap a video and say, this is my problem. That use of technology and giving the tenants that mobility is actually enabling our property managers and our landlords that use Release just to be able to act more efficiently and actually send the right person out to the job and improve that tenant relationship. But then from a property manager or a landlord perspective, you know, they themselves also have access to all of this property data via the Release platform on their phone or a tablet or something like that. So if they go out to visit a tenant, they can be confident that what is stored in Release and accessible to them is the latest version of the lease, for example. So if there's a dispute and the tenant is saying, no, I don't owe you this, I don't need to pay this, the landlord or the property manager can go straight to their phone, pull up the relevant lease. They're confident because it's cloud-based that it is the latest version, and they can say, actually, here it is in writing. This is what you are obligated to pay, and therefore, you know, end of discussion essentially. So just that degree of mobility and actually having the resources to hand. It's not all about being able to lie on the beach with a pina colada and access your emails. It's actually about being able to be really professional and put together in the moment when you're actually with the clients.
No, definitely. I mean, a friend of mine, he has recently moved out of his old flat into a new one, both rented, and he said the first experience he had with the landlord as such was all very manual, as in any problems he had all had to go via WhatsApp. There was no sort of system in place where, you know, he had a good experience and could simply log into a portal, you know, download all of his documents, etc. But where he is now, the way that they're doing it is he has been invited to a portal as such, where he can log in, you know, download all of the documents he needs, send any requests via this portal. So he has literally turned around to me and said, it's, you know, it's a game changer. It's amazing because the experience he is now receiving is 10 times better than what he was where he was previously living. So it just goes to show that it's not just all about, well, it's very important to make the lives of business owners easier and, you know, better for them, but it's also about making sure that their tenants are just as happy with the service and the experience that they are receiving, which is why something like Release can obviously, you know, you kill two birds with one stone. You've got a good streamlined business, and then you've got your tenants who are just as happy with the service they're receiving.
Yeah.
Perfect. Barry, do you have anything further to add to this slide?
Not really.
Okay, well, just one thing that I did want to add before we do go next. I know point number 3 are the solutions. So just to give a bit of context on that, when we say solutions, we basically mean something like Released and Xero to assist with that portfolio management and that workplace mobility. So I don't want to keep going over the things that we have mentioned, such as the tenant experience and, you know, what Released can do to help with that. But if you were looking for, you know, a portfolio management and a finance system all in one, which can help kill all of those risks and really assist with the workplace mobility, etc., then I would definitely say that Released and Xero are the ones to go for. Next slide, please. Perfect. So challenge 3 is navigating uncertainty in the industry, but also around adopting technology. So we have briefly touched base on this about businesses who are still using manual books, whether it's spreadsheets or, you know, got invoices stored in a folder under their desk. And we have mentioned why they might be uncertain to adopt tech and why they haven't yet made that move. From my experience and my point of view, I always feel as if, you know, businesses in general, not just property businesses, are afraid to adopt tech because they don't know what the technology does. as in, you know, they might have gone on Google and seen the name of a software, but they haven't actually seen this technology or this software in play. They don't know what it does, they don't know how it works, they don't know how it can help, the benefits, etc. So I've always found that as soon as you have a meeting with a client, or you know, you're doing a demo just in general, as soon as you've had that presentation or that demo, they will always turn around and they will say, wow, like I can't believe that this is what I have been missing out on all this time. I didn't know that it did that. I didn't know that I could do this. And they're amazed at the things that it can do, and it's just simply because they didn't know that it did that for them. So I have found that is one of the biggest reasons why businesses today aren't so keen on adopting tech. But I don't know what it's been like from your side, Grace, because I know obviously being within the property sector, you have businesses and accountants on behalf of businesses approaching you all the time. So how have they been convinced to want to use Released?
Yeah, sure. So I think it's exactly that. There's often a lot of skepticism at the beginning, and people are thinking, oh, how could this possibly help so much? You know, well, and one thing we hear a lot, and Barry kind of alluded to, is, you know, we know that our systems are wildly inefficient. We know that we shouldn't be using 9 spreadsheets to manage this portfolio and all of our accounting, but it kind of works for us. We sort of know how to do this. So it's sort of, I suppose, them feeling comfortable in being uncomfortable, and just kind of accepting the way that they live that way. But what we see really is that once people do get a chance to actually take a look at the platform and understand integrations and really see where that automation is going to come in, you know, their minds are kind of blown, because they realize, and they put it in their own real world examples, right? They realize, oh, okay, I don't have to sit there for a whole day and send out all of these invoices. Okay, what can I do with that time? Oh, I don't have to, you know, keep a manual log of all of this tenant communication. Okay, what can I do with that time? And I think their mind then starts to kind of run with them a little bit about all the opportunities that could be lying ahead of them. But I think that, you know, the biggest prohibitor is just really, it's not fear, because they're not afraid. It's just sort of fear of the unknown, and not really knowing what's out there. Being worried about making the wrong decision is huge. So people thinking that they are going to adopt a software that eventually they're going to hate it and it's not going to work the way they want it to work, you know, and then all feeling fearful around even the software adoption process. You know, they've never done it before, they've never had to go through the selection process, they've never had to review different systems or different accounting solutions, so they don't really know how to do that. But I would say that, you know, there's people on hand like the Raffingers team that, you know, in the digital solution side of things can support every single step of the way. You know, they are, you know, Emma and your team, like, you're impartial. You know, you don't have any like financial incentive to refer any clients to anyone like Released or anything else. You're just trying to find the genuine right solutions for your clients. And equally, you know, for Released, the type of business that we are is SaaS, which stands for software as a service. So what that means is that we basically want to become like a long-standing service for our clients. And therefore, as a business, we're invested in finding the right fit for us. So as I mentioned before, you know, we're a solution for commercial and mixed portfolios. 100% residential portfolios we normally don't engage with. So if a residential portfolio comes to us and starts talking to us, we are likely, if we're not the right fit for them, to nip that conversation in the bud and say, look, there are other solutions out there that will be better for you. So I think it's around realizing that people really want to find the right solutions for everyone, and everyone is invested in making this successful for everyone involved. And hopefully that like mitigates against a little bit of the fear around making the wrong decision.
Definitely. And one thing that I did want to add to that is I think it's so important to have a strong support network around you. And what I mean by that is obviously making sure that you've got everyone on board within your business and making sure they're happy to adopt the technology in place, but also having, you know, someone like your accountant always on board, always there for you. So for example, me in this situation, I will always be there every step of the way when a business is adopting tech for the first time. So like you said, I would obviously never recommend anything that I don't think would be suitable for their business. I would only ever build an app stack which I think will work well for them and the way the business runs. And what I also think is nice about us working with Released is obviously whilst we're both on board, you know, there's that support, there's that implementation process that we're literally on board all the time to help with any questions, whether they're just generic, whether they're detailed. But I think having that person there is definitely a must. And I think that is one of the main things when making a leap to adopting tech that you will always need. You will always need that one person who is there for you to basically help you make that transition. Perfect. Barry, there was one thing that I did want to ask you actually on this slide. And just from your point of view, we just want to know how businesses have pivoted and how they have struggled with the uncertainty in the industry.
Are we talking property generally or all businesses?
No, property generally.
Okay. I mean, I don't think they're that different from anyone else in that respect. The last couple of years have been like I think we'll look back on this time and wonder how we all got through it. But it's what I've noticed is it's exactly what we said before. It's accelerated a lot of trends that were already happening. So, you know, from the mundane, I'm not wearing a suit. I'd never worn a suit. You know, I'd never had a day. Fridays was dressed down and I hated wearing a suit, and now I never wear a suit. In fact, one of my biggest property clients, he was the man who moved me away from suits once and for all, because I was kind of nervous about the reaction of clients. And I went to his big offices in, I won't say where because it'll be a clue to who he is, and expecting him to be all dressed up as he always was, and he was wearing tracksuit bottoms and a t-shirt, and I thought, okay, this is the end of suits as we know it, through to the more profound, the working from home, the technologies, which I think has changed once and for all. That was again a trend that was perhaps coming, and we all kind of very gently dipping our toe in and then had to jump on it very quickly and go that way. And I think I think that's the main thing that's happened, and I don't think it's necessarily all bad. You know, a lot of stuff like less formality, like, you know, more flexible working, like I think people have learned to be a lot more flexible generally about the way they do everything, and I don't think that will change. So there's lots of good things. I mean, the bad things are the obvious. There's been lots of financial struggles, lots of people, you know, wondering about survival and all the other things that have happened. But I don't think it's particularly property focused. I think the same challenges that are there in the property sector have been more generally and widely for everyone, really.
Great, thank you, Barry. Can we have the next slide, please? I believe it is time for questions, if I'm correct. Great, perfect. So please feel free to add any questions into the Q&A box that you do have for either myself, Barry, or Grace. But we have had a couple of questions come in the meantime, which I will now ask. So the first one we have, and I think this one is for you, Grace, is my portfolio is managed via an estate agent. Can I still use Released, and how would this work?
Yeah, absolutely. So you definitely could. It depends really what you're looking for. So if you're keen to get sort of all the financial information centralized, and you want to have your own view of all of your properties, it's definitely worth looking at. It would also be an option for you to actually use Release to bring the management in-house. You know, if you no longer wanted to leverage the services of that estate agent and you wanted to actually, begin to manage it yourself via like automation, so it's much less work. But every business is different. Every property businesses don't can be similar, but there are some with really, really unique situations. And what we would tend to do is we would sit down with someone like Emma, but also with someone from our team, and really understand like what your business needs are and what is it that you're actually trying to achieve with what it is you're actually trying to achieve, like, and the goals you're trying to hit by using systems. And then we basically work backwards from there to figure out if we were the right fit for you.
Perfect. Second question is, how will Released and my accounting system work together? So I'm more than happy for you to start that, Grace, and then I'll elaborate a little bit more.
Yeah. I'm not gonna. I don't want to start talking too much accounting stuff with two accountants on the call. I'll do my entry level. So Released has a live two-way integration with Xero. And we also integrate with another platform called QuickBooks Online. So let's just talk about Xero because they work in the same way. When we talk about a live two-way integration, what that means is that basically means that information is flowing between two systems all the time. So if you were to create an invoice or actually a task that has a bill or anything associated with it on the Release side, that information is going to flow straight into Xero. And if you've got accounts teams, or if you're outsourcing to references, for example, and they are like reconciling any payments in Xero or doing any other work for that matter, any changes to those invoices in Xero are going to flow back to released. And really key accounting information is driven from the accounting system, like your chart of accounts, that gets pulled from Xero into released. But really what you should think of it as is like they're two systems that mirror one another, just to make sure that all the data is accurate and up to date. So release will enrich the data in Xero and vice versa. So Emma, you can maybe take it away from there and add a bit more colour to that.
Well, I was going to say, you've literally taken the words out of my mouth, but just to add to that, like I've said before, we do specialise in the accounting software Xero. So that was one of the many reasons why we love Release, because literally it is the case that the two integrate with each other, both mirror each other, and you've got one side for your finances and then one side for your property management. So like you said, if something was to be added to Release, for example, such as an invoice, that will instantly be pulled through to Xero, and it will just be there mirrored, ready for you to obviously access that information. But I just think having the two systems work together is just a streamless, easy process where when it gets to your financial year end, for example, you don't then have to start stressing about, oh no, I don't know, what invoices are outstanding. I don't know, what invoices I need to put on the system, etc. So I just think having two systems which are in place, mirroring with each other, it just makes complete sense. And I know I've said it before, but obviously both me and Grace will always be on hand to obviously assist with the setup, the implementation, to make sure things are talking to one another. But yeah, it's like I've said before, the two work absolutely great with one another. Question number 3 is, currently I have a portfolio of 100 plus properties. What would be the most efficient way to manage this? I believe that's one for you, Grace.
Yep. So if it's a profile that we can help, so one that has a portion of commercial in there as well, that's what we would normally lean towards. Then yeah, absolutely look into Release and Xero. Again, just to echo what Emma said, Emma will be able to help you on the Xero side of things and getting all of that set up and ready to go, and then our teams would work collaboratively to integrate the two. If you're looking at around 100 properties, I mean, that's a really high volume of like rent reviews, maintenance tasks, inspections, insurance renewals, I mean, everything to keep up with. So really what you need is a centralized system that's going to not only automate some of those tasks that you need to stay on top of, but it's also going to help you to just make sure you don't miss anything that actually needs human action to action. And that's one of the big challenges. So I definitely think if you're in a position where you've already got 100 units, it's likely that you're probably trying to grow, and you've probably got a good degree of capital there that you can actually expand your portfolio. So yeah, definitely get in touch with Barry and Emma, and I'm sure they can help you to figure out how you can really maximize this portfolio by just making it a bit more efficient with technology.
Perfect. Barry, I believe these next 3 questions are for you. So I will start with the first one. The first question is, should I use a limited company?
Oh, wow. Possibly. Sorry, that's a rubbish answer, but I'll elaborate. So generally speaking, the trend for all sorts of property investment work is towards limited companies, and the trend has been for several reasons. The thing that was the biggest driver was the change in the interest relief rules for individuals and partnership landlords. That drove most residential investment into limited companies. The main obstacle to that is not tax related. It's scale. Whilst it almost certainly for most people who are still who have other income, who decide to invest in property, are going to find a better tax outcome by being a company. There will be examples where people have 1, possibly 2 properties, where the extra costs they incur, compliance costs, type costs that they'll incur from having a company, won't be worth it for the amount that they'll save on the tax. That said, generally speaking, most property investment these days is done through limited companies. The next question that usually follows from that is, how do I get my existing portfolio in there? And that's a much bigger conversation than we could have on here. There are ways of doing it, but they are none without problems, risks, and lots of obstacles to overcome. Sometimes those obstacles can't be completely overcome, and you just have to suck up the extra tax or find some other way to do it. So the short answer is probably yes. The much longer answer is you've got to look at every case in its as an individual and decide. But generally, yes.
Great. Well, if anyone does have any further questions on the limited company, please feel free to contact Barry. I will give everyone's emails out again at the end, so just as a reminder. But question number 2 is, what can I do to mitigate SDLT?
What can you do? So generally there's not much. If it's just a single property purchase of, you know, residential investment or even commercial, where you have slightly more complex transactions, there are options. So for instance, properties that are acquisitions that are of multiple properties, which increasingly includes things like residential properties with an annex, where that actually counts as 2 rather than 1 if it's self-contained. There are things like multiple dwellings relief, where we go back to what the last question was, where we're talking about property incorporations. There are ways to incorporate into companies without triggering the SDLT charges that might otherwise arise. We also have where people are buying blocks of flats or other large amounts of property in one go, as well as multiple dwellings relief. There are ways to switch. There's an option to switch to commercial rates of stamp duty, which are lower for large enough acquisitions. There are things like sale and leaseback reliefs. There's a large number of reliefs that are potentially accessible, but broadly speaking, they need the specific circumstances to apply for them to be available. So in the main, where people are just buying property as an investment, there tends to not be much they can do these days beyond factor that in as the cost of an acquisition. And in the days when that was a relatively insignificant cost are broadly gone, sadly.
Perfect. And then question.
And actually, it's done. I should say, one of the reasons why it wasn't just as a revenue raising exercise to push stamp duty up. It was designed to take the heat out of the market, because, you know, the days of buying a property, watching it grow very quickly in value and then flipping it for a gain are broadly gone, because you have to factor in the high cost of transactions and recover that before you make a gain. So it's done its job in that respect.
Perfect. And then last question is, depending on the purposes of whatever deal is being done, where VAT is applicable, how do I reclaim any VAT I am paying?
Okay, so property VAT is probably the most complex aspect of property advisory, of real estate advisory, because the number of ways in which you can fall foul of the rules without intending to and suffer losses that you shouldn't need to suffer, or get the compliance wrong and as a result find yourself suffering losses that you shouldn't need to suffer, and the problem is that there's almost no 2 transactions that look the same, because in the real world, whilst the rules are not as complicated as perhaps they appear at first glance, in the real world, when you're applying them to real life circumstances, they're often much more complex than that. So all I can say is, if you're in a property related transaction that has any VAT aspects to it at all, whether that be, you know, paying VAT out on an acquisition, whether it be incurring costs on development, whether it be, you know, property businesses that are paying out VAT on various costs, if you're in any sort of situation like that, you're sadly going to be in a complex environment and you need to take advice.
Great, thank you, Barry. They are all of the questions we have. So if anybody does have any further questions, please feel free to pop us an email, or alternatively visit our website raffingers.co.uk to get in touch. I will just reiterate our emails for the sake of our viewers. So mine is emma.cohen@raffingers.co.uk, Barry's is barry.sorath@raffingers.co.uk, and Grace's is grace.thompson@release.com. But hopefully, you know, you can contact us again, like I said, via our website, and if there is anything, we will be sure to help. But that is everything from me. So thank you, Barry and Grace, for joining, and thank you everybody for tuning in.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you.